So, what are your thoughts on BDS? Some folks want to know your thoughts on BDS.
So,
That's a light topic for you.
well, it's an important topic, and I have lived in Israel and worked in Israel on a kibbutz. I grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood. Um, I'm supportive of the state of Israel, the Jewish state of Israel. That doesn't mean I support the Netanyahu government. I do not. I'm not a supporter of BDS. However, let me say this, that my opponent, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, has co-sponsored legislation that would outlaw BDS. And, I certainly don't favor outlawing BDS at all. I think it's important that we start having, the United States has to play a very aggressive role in a peace process in the Middle East, and it has not been doing that. It really abdicated that years ago. There was no major initiative that came out of the Obama administration. And, instead you've had the continuing militarization of the entire region. When the Obama administration signs a $100 billion arms sales agreement with the Saudis, and now the Trump administration has done that and more, that becomes the justification for more arms sales to other countries in that region as well. We need to be having a very aggressive peace agenda. I respect those who believe BDS is the way to go. I'm not there yet. I don't know if I ever will be, but I'd like to see the federal government, the United States government, take a leading role. And what we need are not just bilateral negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but we need to bring in all other kinds of regional players into this and have some kind of a regional peace conference and a global arms control agreement. I'm not talking about just weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons, but conventional arms as well.
Unfortunately, do you feel like the United States at the moment then is really going the wrong way about this? I mean, I don't know if you heard some of Chuck Schumer's recent comments at AIPAC and so forth, but it was very, I thought, very disheartening and not very pro-diplomatic as far as like a peace agenda. I'm not sure if you heard those. If you heard,
I didn't. What was he basically saying? That Israel can do no wrong?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that was the basic. It was Israel can do no wrong. Everything we're doing is fine. There's nothing. It's there's no peace because other people don't want to listen to the Torah, and it was disturbing to listen to. And it's like, okay, that's not how we're gonna find any peaceful solutions here. And I appreciate the fact that you're willing to approach it from a more kind of gray area where it's like, look, you can be pro the people that live in a place while still opposing oppressive things militaries do. I live in the United States. I like the United States. I'm opposed to a lot of the things our military does, not the people in there, but the decisions that the people with power make and put them into.
Well, and that's the point that I'm glad you framed it that way, because that is the way I see it. I'm an American. We're Americans. It doesn't mean that I should fall into line and support a drone war that is going on in, 7, 8 countries for years now, and it's expanding further. They're going to expand drone wars into Africa now. It doesn't mean I'm anti-American. It means I just don't like the policies that are being adopted by the foreign policy establishment in Washington, D.C. Likewise, I'm pro-Israel. I love Israelis. I've been there. I've lived there. I've worked there. I've got friends. I've got lots of folks who I love who are in Israel. By the same token, I believe in the Palestinians should have self-determination and they should have a Palestinian state. I don't support a lot of the military policies of Israel. I feel like I'm free to be critical of Israeli policy. I'm also critical of the Palestinian leadership. I'll say this, that a lot of people on the left in this country, they are rightfully critical of some of Israel's policies, but sometimes they let that blind themselves to where they perhaps should be calling out the Palestinian leadership at the same time. When you have a Palestinian president who speaks out of both sides of the mouth and says one thing in English and another thing in Arabic, when their textbooks are preaching hatred, there's something wrong with that. And, that's I think both sides have, there's room to criticize both sides. Both sides have to see the common humanity of the Palestinian people and the Israelis. And there needs to be a very aggressive peace process. You know, for much of my early life, you know, every presidential administration, the idea of brokering a Mideast peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians was one of the top foreign policy agendas. You know, Nixon, Carter, you know, even Ronald Reagan, and of course Bill Clinton tried mightily the Oslo Accords. But it seems like really since George W. Bush, it's been off the table. After September 11th occurred, you know, the Iranians, a regime that is very repressive, very repulsive, they sent a diplomatic note to George W. Bush through Swiss emissaries. I don't know if you've ever read about this or heard about this. An 18-page letter in which the Iranian leader, the president at the time, was seeking what he called a grand bargain, where everything would be on the negotiation table, including the status of Jerusalem. And the Bush administration never even responded. So
well, let me ask you this, like, and then we got to switch topics here because I know you got limited time, but I want to ask you this just because you said I did live in Israel. One of the things that people talk about here in the States, and something I've heard people say before is they're like, you know, you can't even bring up, you know, some of the oppressive things that goes on a lot of the time, like especially progressives and so forth. A lot of times when people bring that up, immediately you're labeled an anti-Semite without any type of actual constructive dialogue. Meanwhile, people say over in Israel, you can talk about it more freely, where they'll more freely criticize what their government is doing. And they're not for stuff like that. There's left-wing people in Israel that don't favor what the military is doing. Would you say that's true? Is that a true assessment?
Yes, that's a very true assessment. The kibbutz that I worked on in Israel was a left of center kibbutz. It was left of the Labor Party. It was Peace Now, openly very critical of the militaristic policies of a Likud government, for instance, and a settlers agenda for the West Bank. I've been for freezing settlements on the West Bank and for a two-state solution. Some people say it's too late for a two-state solution. I certainly hope that's not the case. I will say that left-wing Peace Now kibbutz really changed over the years. And I think this is the result of two intifadas. The intifadas, you know, where it was campaigns of suicide bombings of civilian buses and other civilians in Israeli cities. It resulted in an awful lot of death among Israelis. You know, as a percentage of the population, it would be like 100 911s, they say, 100 September 11s, something like that. It has an effect on the population. The population grows weary, and people who I knew who were Peace Now, over the years, they've come to the view that, well, peace tomorrow, peace, maybe peace never. You know, they've gotten demoralized about it. And that's what we have to fight, is against that demoralization, against this idea that peace is not even possible anymore. You know, there are major arms industries in the United States and elsewhere, and military industrial complexes in the United States and in other countries that have vested interests in a war economy, in hostilities continuing, and we need to have a very aggressive peace agenda. It's not enough just to vilify the Israelis and say they should not have a Jewish homeland, that they're colonialists and all of that. You know, we can argue the historical record forever. This country was built on colonialism. We took a whole continent away from indigenous people. Well, we've got to start where we're at. You can't go back and, you know, depopulate where people have lived for years now. And, you know, it's unrealistic to say that, you know, you can turn the clock back 50 years in Israel. But that said, we have to have real peace process and negotiations. And it has to be a top priority. It can't just be lip service. And I'm afraid that's what it was for the past too many years now, 20 years.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. That was a clip from Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. What does that mean? That means I log on to a stream and people tweet me articles over on Twitter at Ron Placone, or they use our Reddit subsection, which is just Get Your News On with Ron over on Reddit. And that's how we build the show. I'm seeing all these articles for the first time. We are literally getting our news on together. Follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone so you can participate. And this show streams live every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please do tune in. If you want to support this show, you can do so over on patreon.com/Ron Placone, where for as low as $1 a month, you get access to exclusive podcasts every week, exclusive videos, free tickets to shows when I'm performing in your town, and more for as low as $1 a month. Please do consider it. Thank you so much for your support. This has been Get Your News On with Ron.